Final Word Cricket Podcast. Adam Collins, Bharat Sundaresan. We're in the middle of Hagley Oval in Christchurch, a gorgeous ground where they've been playing Test cricket for the last decade in this city. Behind our right shoulder here, or my right shoulder, Bharat's left, is the pitch. We've just been talking to the curating staff. There's been 12 millimetres of grass left on it. Looks like a green top, but Baz, traditionally this pitch has given a fair bit for batters as well as bowlers.
It has. The first question I had for the curator was like, will it play anything similar to the one 4 years ago when I came to Christchurch last and covered a test match here when India were blown away in 2.5 days, felt like 2 days. And he said, no, that pitch had a lot more grass, same height in terms of 12 mm, but just thicker, as thick as your hair, Adam Collins, or as thick as your hair always is. So, no, I think it's going to play differently to that. I don't think it'll be a green seamer, it won't be a green mamba. But still, a lot of grass, but that's what you expect whenever you come to New Zealand.
Yeah, I think that's right. Look, the preparation for the Australians are at the back now netting. We've been watching the top four go about their business for the last hour or so. A number of them have experience on this ground, including Stephen Smith, who made 138 in a huge partnership with Joe Burns, who I think it's the highest score for an Australian opener in New Zealand across the decades that they've been playing in this country. Of course, most of the team's been turned over since then, but Smith has some nice memories on this ground and was enjoying himself in the nets, albeit being given a nice workout by Michael Nisa as always. Usman Khawaja was in that side as well, Mitchell Marsh too, and of course Brendan McCullum. This was the Brendan McCullum test 8 years ago. I had the great fortune of being on commentary that week and witnessing it from that vantage point, and him teeing off after lunch and finishing with a 54-ball century, the quickest in the history of Test cricket. So the fact that the pitch was very green on that occasion when we arrived had no bearing on the game itself. Australia did take wickets in that first session, but there were loads of runs on day one, and Australia eventually won the fixture in 4 days, but it was a good balance between bat and ball.
It's a very good scoring ground as well. You see some of the many scores, not just in red ball cricket, but across the board. A lot of big scores get made here, and a lot of quick scores get made here as well. We can see the outfield as well. It's so large. The ball just flies off this. It's not that thatchy outfield grass you see in some places around New Zealand. We saw it at the Basin Reserve. The ball wasn't flying off, but here the ball just flies off. And I think the acoustics at the Hagley Oval, I think the acoustics in the South Island when it comes to cricket are much better than what you hear in the North Island. There's also more sheep here, fewer people. Maybe that has something to do with it. I just made that up, but the acoustics are better. That bit I didn't make up. But so look, I think we saw last week as well. It's not that run scoring was not possible on that pitch. Cam Green showed us what you can do if you can apply yourself. So did Josh Hazlewood, so did Nathan Lyon. Not three guys you would expect to be talking about when it comes to batting exploits with this Australian team. But you're right, we just saw them in the nets. But obviously my big takeaway from that was Steve Smith agrees with us where he says that the first two Mighty Duck movies, excellent, but then it just kind of falls off the cliff, which we agreed as well last night.
Yeah, we did a bit of a movie marathon last night out the back of Steve Smith comparing himself to the Cat Gaffney with his catch at first slip off Travis Head last week. A great catch, and the team as well. And watching that back in real time, I still think that it's a bit odd that she was allowed to be subbed in for a penalty shootout when Goldberg had kept for the duration of the game. But I don't know the rules of ice hockey. That feels a bit skew-whiff to me. But the first film holds up. 1992, 1993. Yes. Emilio Estevez, he's a believable character.
He is.
And the team, ramshackle at the start, Joshua Jackson before he goes on Dawson's Creek and stardom and all the rest of it as a youngster. Emilio Estevez hooking up with his mum. Then she's not selected for the second film. D2 is nowhere near as good as I remembered it. The Junior Goodwill Games does not exist in the first instance. Why are you picking half of the American squad, more than half the American squad, from a club team in Minnesota who didn't win a game before Gordon Bombay rocked up? It's like the old New South Wales filling half the Australian Test team, but more advanced, more developed, more unbelievable. And them changing into the Ducks strip for the final period of the final against the villains, who are Iceland. Why are Iceland the bad guys in all of this? I think they're just a replacement for Russia, because you couldn't really call the Russians the enemy in the mid-1990s when they were briefly a democracy, something like that.
And look, it was straight from Rocky IV, right? The way the Iceland coach is, he's like that evil manager that Dolph Lundgren has in the Rocky movie. And even the last scene where you see this good-looking allegedly Icelandic kid missed the penalty, the famous one that she saves in the end. To win the Junior Goodwill Games for the Ducks, not USA. Though they get into the tournament as USA, but then end up winning it as the Ducks. And what does he say? As he's walking past the Iceland coach, he says, "You let me down," and he says, "You let yourself down." That's classic Dolph Lundgren areas. So I think they borrowed a lot from movies from the 80s. Even we heard some Home Alone tributes. Some scenes which paid ode to Home Alone, which released a year earlier, but it was already become a behemoth in that sense. But I think my biggest takeaway also was from the second one. I think there's a subtle hint at how biased the selection was. From the tutor, the lady Mackenzie, who at one point randomly says, "Just get up and introduce yourself," and then you hear that 80% of the team is from Minnesota.
And also, they're all from the same school, yet they're all from different parts of Minnesota. Don't know whether that.
Yeah, it's a bit.
Yeah, there's some incongruity there. And the third film, I got about half an hour in and had to pull stumps.
Yeah,
I did watch the third movie at the cinema when it came out. I think it was 1997 from memory. But yeah, it doesn't have the same oomph as the first one with these battling kids in a classroom who get dragged into line by this wayward lawyer. By the third episode, but he's already coached the American side, and he's off running all of hockey for the Junior Goodwill Games across the world. Doesn't exist. But it did put the Goodwill Games on the map. I reckon when they came to Brisbane in 2001, the reason why we knew what the Goodwill Games were because of the Mighty Ducks. So that might be its greatest lasting legacy. In terms of the New Zealand side, we need something of a
Who
Mighty
are not
Ducks.
in the Goodwill Games, by the way.
We need something of a Mighty Ducks revival for them to win here this week.
We do.
And that's not to, they've got their two aging stars Williamson remains a star, Southey not quite so much these days, but two blokes who came through the Northern District system together, played New Zealand 19s together, played their 50th Test matches together against Zimbabwe in 2016. It's fitting they'll be doing it at Hagley Oval, a ground where Williamson has got a Test double 100, a ground where Tim Southey has more wickets than anybody else, 59 of them at an average of 21, 4 fifers. He's got a 6-for in there against Sri Lanka a few years ago. So a ground that Southey and Williamson both enjoy, and a chance for Southey just to tighten things up a bit, not just as a bowler, but within the camp as well. We heard Ross Taylor on television yesterday in Australia saying there is some consternation in the camp. I mean, I don't think what he said was outlandish. I don't think what he said was over the top. Most of it was self-evident. But Wagner being forced into retirement, which we all knew. It's hardly a secret that Wagner retired because he was told he wasn't going to get picked anymore. But also that Southey batting the way that he did, not sending a particularly good signal to the ranks. I thought that was quite interesting from Roscoe, who's worth listening to when he speaks.
Always is, and he's been part of a New Zealand dressing room where there was a lot of unrest, and if you remember, it had a lot to do with him being captain, or him losing his captaincy, I should say. So he knows what that New Zealand team setup is. Well, it's been a couple of years since he retired, but most of the setup is still the same, right? Like in terms of whether it's Gary Stead as coach or most of the senior players, because New Zealand rarely bring in players completely out of the blue, don't they? I mean, Ben Sears, who's already played 16 to 18 T20I, so he's not a complete outsider in a test sense. So he is likely to make his debut in place of Will O'Rourke, who I think was the first complete relative unknown we'd seen in New Zealand ranks for a long time. I mean, even Scott Kugelheim's been around for so long. When Ross Taylor says these things, I'm sure he knows more than what you think he knows, even though he's not part of the setup anymore. And I remember when Tim Southey was left out of the Sydney Test in 2020, when was it? Yeah,
early 2020,
just before COVID. And Matt Henry was brought in. He was filthy. He was very vocal about what he thought about being left out, and you clearly saw what he thought of Gary Stead's decision to leave him out. So it's not the first time, and we just look at New Zealand team and talk about them being like these goody two shoes kind of guys. But look, it's a competitive dressing room, so there will be a bit of argy-bargy, which is also the name of a restaurant where we're staying, by the way. I just noticed that on Google Maps. But I think so. it's a good thing, right? If we've learned anything from the Mighty Ducks, when the team is pushed, and that's pretty much the the movie arc in all three, or at least the first two, right? They lose faith in their coach, Gary Stead. I'm not saying that New Zealand have lost faith in Gary Stead, but
He's second steady here.
well, he
Stead's
has
dead, baby. Stead's dead.
well, he has to be God in Bombay. Now, look, Gary Stead, I do know is happily married, but let's talk in fun along fictional lines. Which one of his cricketers' mothers would you want to date? Maybe let's not go there.
Might come back to that on commentary through the week. Other bits and bobs. The sexy Matt Henry summer may well continue here at Hagley. He took 7 for 23 against the Proteas here in a wild test match a few years ago. I think this is the ground where he took 7 for and made 70 in the same match when there was 2 lopsided results. Mitchell Starc spoke to us down here a couple of hours ago. So Mitch Starc's taken 354 test wickets, 355 being such a huge number in Australian fast bowling due to DK Lilly. So in all probability he'll overtake Lilly this week, and it provided pause for thought, and he spoke a little bit about his early days in the Australian side, and the line at the press conference is when he said that it was expressed to him early in his career, I think it was by Tim Nilsson.
Yes.
He was intimating that he needed to, his words, harden the fuck up.
Yeah.
So
He didn't say fuck on
no, he
on
said
record,
harden
yeah.
the F up.
Yeah.
And just on that, I mean, the fact that Starc has played, along with Hazelwood and Cummins, every test in this run, 6 to this point, no reason why they won't play 7, although if Nisa came in this week, I'm sure he would do well based on the spell we just saw him bowl to Stephen Smith, but that's improbable unless someone stands on a cricket ball, so to speak. So the big 3 played all 5 in Australia, played last week, will play here at Hagley Oval, which wasn't expected. They keep on keeping on, but Starc the chance to do something special across a long career and didn't play here in 2016, one of the many injury layoffs he had earlier in his career, but such a dependable bowler for Australia these days, not just in terms of what he produces, but getting on the park, and that'll be recognised accordingly when he overtakes or matches then overtakes Lilly this week.
Another lovely takeaway from that press conference when he spoke about him not having played here in Christchurch is one of the local reporters asked him what his memories of cricket at Christchurch are, and he spoke about how he sat in that tent and watched the Australian women's team, which obviously includes his wife, winning the last T20 World Cup. When was 20?
It was the 50 over World Cup here in early
50 over
22.
World Cup in 2022, correct. I just saw the big board there. So that's his last memory or like lasting memory of cricket at Christchurch. Another takeaway line from that press conference was when I think Dan Brettig asked him about how you needed a hard edge against New Zealand as an Australian team. You were asked to get a hard edge. That's a politically correct thing. I just keep throwing these expressions out thinking it's all cool, but
Hard edge is fine.
hard edge is fine.
Sharp edge might be the better way of
All right.
saying it, but hard edge will work.
Hard edge, okay. Well, hard edge is what you needed, and then he said, "Nan, you're no longer asked to be a grumpy, gnarly bugger." I love that, grumpy, gnarly bugger.
I think there's something to that. Like, he's from the generation that were part of all the dramas in South Africa in 2018, and the lead up to that, in context, it was that when England rocked up in November 2017, they thought part of their comparative advantage was being pricks, and they had some success playing that way over time. And the 2015 World Cup final, well documented that they didn't want to be nice to their visitors. They wanted to make things as difficult as possible. But as Tim Payne said when he was captain, and I'm sure it would be the same if we asked Pat Cummins directly about it as well, they wasted so much emotional energy sledging the shit out of their opposition, and they've realised that they're better suited temperamentally to being good people and still playing bloody hard, but being good people along the way. There'll be a full preview of this test match, Baz, with Jeff and me tomorrow after we've heard from the aforementioned Pat Cummins. We'll hear from Kane Williamson later, but then they'll have Tim Southey's presser tomorrow to, as I say, mark his 100th test. There will be a preview of the Durham-Sharla test match in the feed with Cam Ponsonby, and I'll probably jump on with him for that as well. We've got our media game this afternoon. I'm captain, he's vice captain of that 11. We're playing the New Zealand media over on the nursery ground, so maybe Cam and I might be a bit indulgent and talk about how you and I have gone, and Jeff and so on. We'll see. Maybe not. Maybe we'll say that tomorrow. Jeff will be with me tomorrow, as I say, doing the preview. Story time in the feed. Everything we do throughout the course of the Australian and New Zealand summer is for Cbus Super, cbussuper.com.au. Get your super sorted out. If you've only started, say, working in the country recently, someone like Barrett here, you've got the chance to communicate with them directly through Jeff and me. Let us know. We can get them in touch with you. Their wonderful past performance is no reliable indicator of future performance. And yes, that will be us done for the time being. The second Test match of the Trans-Tasman Trophy starting here on Friday. Adam Collins, Bharat Sundaresan. We will talk to you later, then tomorrow, and then the day after that as well. Quack, quack, quack.